Hey man, I haven't seen you around before. Want to play a game of Commander? I've never played Magic before. I don't even have a deck. Don't worry, I've got extras. I get all of my decks from ThursdayNightMagic.com, and they're perfect for beginners. If you decide to buy your own, you can use my coupon code TNM10 to get 10% off your first order. But I'll let you borrow one of mine for now, and I'll teach you how to play. Okay, sure. I'll take this Edric, Spymaster of Tress deck. So what do we do first? So first, you're going to start by shuffling your cards, except for your commander. This is a special card that determines what color or colors your deck will be. This is known as the color identity. Edric is blue and green, also known as Simic, so the cards in your deck can be blue, green, both, or colorless, but they can't be red, black, or white in any way. It sits in the command zone until you're ready to cast it. If it would go anywhere except the battlefield, you can choose to put it back in the command zone. If you do, you can cast it again by paying an additional 2 mana plus its normal cost. This is known as the commander tax. This is a pretty tall stack of cards. How big are these decks? In Commander, there are 99 cards plus your commander. Sometimes you'll see partner commanders and companions, but we'll cover those another time. They're not important right now. What is important is that your deck can only contain 1 copy of each non-basic land card. This is called the singleton rule. So I can play as many basic lands as I want, but everything else is restricted to a single copy? Exactly, you've got it. Great. So what's a land? There are 9 card types in Magic: Artifact, Enchantment, Instant, Sorcery, Creature, Planeswalker, Battles, Kindreds, and Lands. Lands are the most fundamental type because they're what allow us to actually play the game. All spells require mana to cast them, and most lands' only function is to tap for mana to cast spells. Basic lands are specifically islands, mountains, forests, swamps, and plains. Unless it says basic on the type line, it's considered a non-basic land and you can only have 1 copy of it in Commander. Oh, okay, I see. That makes sense. So is there any kind of restriction on lands, or you can just play whatever besides the singleton rule? You can only play lands that fall within your commander's color identity. I'm playing Ariad of the Charmed Apple, so I can play swamps and plains. So I can play forests and islands? That's exactly right, and at some point you need to determine who's going first. Most people choose to roll dice, but I'll go first to show you the phases of a turn. After your deck is shuffled, you'll draw your opening hand of 7 cards. So what am I looking for in my opening hand here? Am I looking for lands or anything in specific? When you first draw your opening hand, it's generally best to determine how many lands you have, then see if you have anything that you can play with just those lands. Best practice is to look for 3 to 4 lands and at least 1 thing you can do in the first 3 turns of the game. There are some variables that might change how you feel about your hand, but that's a good rule of thumb while you learn how to navigate mulligans. So what's a mulligan? So a mulligan is a rule that lets you send back your opening hand and redraw it if you don't like it. Every time you send it back, you'll redraw a whole new 7 cards, but you'll have to put back a card for each time you've mulliganed. In Commander, the first one is free, but after that you go down to 6, then 5, then 4, and so on. Got it, I understand. I'm satisfied with my hand, so I think I'll keep. What's next? Now that we've both decided to keep our hand and we've determined who's going first, that player starts their turn. There are 8 primary phases in a turn: untap, upkeep, draw, pre-combat main phase, combat, post-combat main phase, end step, and cleanup step. The untap step is where you'll untap all of your permanents. Nothing else happens here in this phase. If something triggers because it untapped during this phase, that trigger is placed on the stack at the start of your upkeep. Your upkeep gives you a chance to evaluate the board state before drawing a card for turn. Sometimes triggers will happen here and you can cast instants at this time, but generally nothing happens during this phase unless a card says so. Your draw step is where you'll draw a card for the turn. Again, nothing else happens here unless a card says otherwise. It's important to note though that in 1v1 games, whoever goes first skips their first draw step, but in multiplayer, everyone draws as normal. That sounds like a lot of rules. It sounds like a lot, but in practicality, all you're doing is turning your cards back to the upright position and drawing a card 95% of the time. Some decks don't even do that depending on how they're built. So what comes after that? Next is your first main phase, or pre-combat main phase. You'll hear people call it both. But this is where the active player, the person whose turn it is, can play lands, cast spells, activate abilities, and so on. Your first and second main phases are the only time that you can cast most cards. The exceptions are instants, which can be cast at any time you have priority, and cards with flash, which literally means the card can be cast at any time you can cast an instant. Activated abilities can be used at any time you can cast an instant unless the card itself says otherwise. For my first turn, I'm just going to start by playing a swamp. You can only play one land a turn unless a card says otherwise. Then I'll move to my combat phase. Normally, this is where I'd get the chance to attack you, but since I don't have any creatures, we're just going to move to the second main phase, or post-combat main phase. This is exactly like the first main phase, except it's after combat, not before. Since I already played a land and I don't have anything to cast, I'm going to move to my end step. This is just like your upkeep, except at the end of the turn. You can cast instants and use abilities, sometimes there's a trigger, but again, nothing happens unless a card says otherwise. Finally is your cleanup step. Your maximum hand size is 7 by default, so if you have more than 7 cards in hand, you'll be forced to discard down to 7. I didn't draw since I went first, and I only played a land, so I have 6 cards in hand. I don't have to discard, so I'll pass the turn. Okay, I see. So untap, nothing happens since I don't have anything. Upkeep, nothing happens. Draw step, since I didn't go first, I draw a card then, right? Yep, you've got it. Cool, so I'll just go to my first main phase and start by playing a forest. You said that the lands tap for mana, so what does that mean? So tapping a card just means that you're turning it sideways to use a tap ability or to attack if it's a creature. Most cards can tap right away unless it says otherwise. For lands, they usually tap to add mana to your mana pool, which you can then use to cast spells or anything else that requires a cost. Forests add green mana, so you can cast anything that has a single green mana symbol or a single generic mana symbol in its casting cost. Okay, so I'll start by tapping my forest, then I'll play an Elvish Mystic. Can I tap this right now just like my forest? That's a great question, but no. This is something called Summoning Sickness that only affects creatures. They can't tap or attack unless they came under your control since the beginning of your previous upkeep. So next turn, we'll check for your upkeep from this turn, and since it entered since then, you'll be able to activate it starting in your upkeep. There's an ability called Haste that basically just means the creature with haste is not affected by Summoning Sickness, but unless it has haste, it can't attack or tap right now. Okay, I got it. In that case, I'll move to combat. Since it can't attack, I'll move to my second main phase. I don't have anything else I can do, so I'll move to my end step. Nothing happens here, so I'll move to my cleanup. I kept 7, drew a card up to 8, but I played a land and a creature, so I'm at 6 and I don't have to discard. I'll pass. Perfect, you're a fast learner. I'll untap, but since it's already untapped, nothing happens. Upkeep, again, nothing happens. Draw, and since it's no longer the first turn, I will draw this turn. I'll begin my first main phase with a Plains, and I'll tap my Plains and my Swamp to play a Sram Senior Edificer. Whenever I cast an aura, vehicle, or equipment, I draw a card. I can't attack because of Summoning Sickness, so I'll just move to my end step. This is called a shortcut, where instead of manually going through the phases like I did last turn, I'm just going to cut to the end step since I can't do anything during those other phases anyway. I have 7 or less cards in hand, so I'm just going to pass the turn. Okay, so I'll start by untapping my forest. Upkeep, nothing happens. Draw step, I'll draw a card. Then my first main phase, I'll play an island. I have a creature now, so I'd like to move to combat. Okay, so now here's where we're going to go over power and toughness. All creatures have a power and toughness box printed on them. The left number is the power, and the right number is the toughness. The power is how much damage it deals, and the toughness is how much damage it can take before it dies. Your Elvish Mystic is a 1/1, so it will deal 1 damage, and it can take 1 damage before dying. My Sram is a 2/2, so if you attack, I can block with Sram. Your Elf will deal 1 damage to my 2 toughness, so my Sram will live, but my Sram will deal 2 damage to your Elf's 1 toughness, killing it in the process. Okay, so maybe I better not do that. I see this Elvish Mystic has the same text that's on my forest. Does that mean it also adds mana? Right, exactly. Since you have 3 mana, you could play Edric. Your forest will tap for green, your island will tap for blue, and your Elvish Mystic will tap for green that can be spent on the generic mana to cast Edric. Okay, since I don't want my Mystic to die in combat, I'd like to move to my second main phase and cast my commander. I still have less than 7 cards, so I'll just pass the turn. Great, so I'll untap my lands, upkeep, nothing happens, draw step, I'll draw a card, then during my first main phase, I'll play a command tower. This is a land that can tap to add 1 mana of any color of my commander's color identity. Since it's white and black, it can add white or black mana. This is considered a non-basic land since it doesn't say basic on the type line. Next, I'll move to combat, and my Sram is a 2/2, but so is your Edric. If I attack, then you could block, which would cause them both to deal 2 damage to each other and they would both die, also known as trading in combat. I don't want to do that, so instead I'll move to my second main phase and tap all 3 of my lands to play my own commander, Ariette of the Charmed Apple. She is a 2/4, so she can kill Edric in combat, but Edric would not kill her since she has 4 toughness. I'm going to move to my end step, and Ariette actually has a trigger here. At the beginning of my end step, each opponent loses X life, and I gain X life, where X is the number of auras I control. Since I don't control any at the moment, it will do 0 damage. Then I'll move to my cleanup step, I don't have to discard, and I'll pass the turn. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching this introduction on how to play Magic. I might pick this up at some other time, but I had to wrap this script up somewhere or I'd be working on it for ages. Leave a like if you liked it. You can find a link to the decks used in this video in the description, and you can use code TNM10 to get 10% off your first order. I'll see you next time.